we are in the period of amendments, Mr. President. May we recognize the sponsor, our distinguished colleague from the great province of Aurora. I have to mention that, Mr. President, nagagalit siya kasi pag great province ng ibang kasama natin. The great province of Aurora, together with Recto Reef, tama yata sa kanila. No other than Senator Chairman Angara, Edgardo Sonny Angara. Mr.
The
President.
chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Sani Angara, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to our Majority Leader for the many side comments, some flattering. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We'd like to enumerate some of the amendments from our colleagues. Mr. President, pagkatapos po ng halos isang linggo ng mga debate at diskusyon dito sa plenaryo, handa na po ang inyong komite sa finance para ilahad ang iba't ibang amenda sa pambansang budget nitong 2022. May pagbabago man sa mga detalye at mga halaga, hindi pa rin nagbago ang pinaka-adhikain ng ating panukalang budget. Magsilbi siyang pangunahing paraan para ipagpatuloy ang pag-ahon ng bansa mula sa pandemya. Especially now, Mr. President, in light of the recent news regarding the emergence of a new variant of concern, the Omicron variant, believed by some to be possibly more virulent and contagious than the Delta variant. Of course, Mr. President, the situation is still developing, but needless to say, we have to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. This is why, Your Honors, our health sector will continue to receive a significant portion of the national budget, with the Department of Health receiving over 230 billion pesos, much higher than the 182 billion pesos it was appropriated under the General Appropriations Bill passed by the House of Representatives. In coordination with our health advocates in the chamber, like Senior Vice Chair Pia Cayetano, Vice Chair Bongo, and Senate President Pro Tempore Ralph Recto, some of the increases in relation to the appropriations made in the GAP or General Appropriations Bill include items related to the pandemic response, namely COVID-19 benefits and compensation for healthcare workers, COVID-19 human resource for health emergency hiring, COVID-19 laboratory network commodities, the DOH's epidemiology and surveillance program, operations for our national reference laboratories like the RITM, and the hiring and training of contact tracers. Mr. President, amendments to special provisions were also introduced so that the significant funding for the purchase and allocation of drugs, medicines, and vaccines included FDA-approved drugs and medicine for the treatment of COVID-19, possibly such as Molnupiravir, which Senator Tolentino is very familiar with. Then the Health Facilities Enhancement Program, or HFEP, of the department will also be augmented, an increase of around 3.23 billion to increasing it to 20.7 billion, which shall be used for the construction, upgrading, or expansion of government healthcare facilities and purchases of hospital equipment. The operations budgets for DOH hospitals across the country will also be increased, with 4.36 billion for Metro Manila, 10.72 billion for those in other regions. Significant funding of up to 24.4 billion will also be devoted as assistance to indigent and financially incapacitated patients across the country. That to strengthen our pipeline of medical frontliners and healthcare workers, adequate funding support, 1.56 billion, will be provided to our state universities and colleges, or SUCs, with schools of medicine. To further augment this, there will be sizable funds for increasing the holding capacity of existing nursing and allied health programs, as urged by our Senior Vice Chair, Senator Pia Cayetano. All of these, of course, Mr. President, are meant to support the implementation of your treasured legislation, along with Vice Chair Senator Joel, the Doktor para sa Bayan Act, or Medical Scholarships Law, which you authored. The education sector will continue to receive the lion's share of national appropriations, with DepEd receiving an increase of 6.7 billion, 26.56 billion for our SUCs, and 1.46 billion for TESDA. This will be particularly important as we consider the expansion of face-to-face classes to more schools across the country. Funding support will remain for our schools as they make the transition to safe face-to-face operations. Then, to provide more fiscal leeway, we have also included a special provision which allows for appropriations for MOE, or maintenance and other operating expenses, to also be used for making improvements or modifications in classrooms, laboratories, and other spaces for proper ventilation, to procure COVID-19 tests for faculty and staff, and for other necessary supplies, equipment, and tools to ensure compliance with existing safety protocols and standards, to rehabilitate water and sanitation facilities, and undergo any other changes to maintain respiratory and hand hygiene within the school premises. Mr. President, we've also included a similar special provision so that our SUCs will also be given leeway to use their MOE to prepare for a return to face-to-face classes upon the recommendation of our Senior Vice Chair, Senator Pia, and Vice Chairpersons Gatchalian and Villar. In fact, with the hope that the implementation of face-to-face classes will be expanded throughout next year, significant funding in unprogrammed appropriations will be set aside to support schools in their transition back to normalcy. Support will also continue for our embattled teachers in the form of extra cash allowances, including teaching supplies allowance or chalk allowance, which our colleagues, including Senator Bong Revilla, have advocated for. We've also increased further the appropriations for the DepEd's Last Mile Schools program, recognizing that as the end of the pandemic nears, so does the opportunity for us to start building schools again with emphasis on the areas that need them the most. To this end, special provisions were included, ensuring that the funds appropriated under basic education facilities and those for the Last Mile Schools program, as recommended by Senators Recto, Vice Chairs Poe and Lacson, and requested by the Department of Education, includes the installation or replacement of disability access facilities like ramps, handrails, and tactile paving, as well as the demolition of unsafe structures and obstructions, construction of gates, and fence systems. A portion of the funds appropriated shall be used for the acquisition of school desks, furniture, and fixtures, including those adapted for children and adults with disabilities. A significant amount under this appropriation shall also be used for the electrification of unenergized schools and modernization of electrical systems of non-grid schools. This includes the installation of solar panels and other applicable renewable energy technologies as recommended by Senators Recto, Hontiveros, Poe, and Lacson. The imperative, Mr. President, remains for us to ensure that our schools are safe and nurturing environments that are truly conducive to learning. To this end, upon the recommendation of our former Vice Chair, Senator Lacson, a special provision was included which sets aside funds for the implementation of a child protection program by the DepEd's Child Protection Unit. This amount includes supporting child protection committees, or CPCs, in schools and conducting workshops and consultations with students, teachers, and families as a way of addressing rising cases of violence against children, including online abuses. The augmentation we initially made to the Tulong Trabajo Fund, worth 500 million, shall remain as pushed by Vice Chair Senator Joel Villanueva, so that more from our workforce will be equipped with the necessary skills to meet the challenges of rapidly evolving workplaces and work structures. To ensure that such appropriations shall be well spent, some funds have also been set aside, as recommended by Vice Chair Win Gatchalian, for TESDA, in coordination with NEDA and the PIDS, to develop a skills demand forecasting model or strategy to ensure that the program offerings of our TVET sector truly meet industry demands. We've also taken into consideration the interpellations raised with CHED and the SUCs by Senators Vice Chair Villanueva and Minority Leader Drilon, and added a special provision which excludes the lands owned and occupied by our SUCs from the CARP. Pagdating naman po sa social welfare, para makasiguro na handa ang gobyerno na matulungan ang mga kababayan natin na nahihirapan dulot ng pandemya, mananatili ang mga pagtaas natin para sa iilang programa ng DSWD at ng DOLE. Halimbawa, patuloy pa rin magkakaroon ng malaking pondo para sa Social Amelioration Program, 5 billion, sa Social Pension for Indigent Senior Citizens, up to 25.018 billion, sa Integrated Livelihood Program ng DOLE, 108 million, sa Assistance to Individuals in Crisis Situations ng DSWD, 12.59 billion, at sa Emergency Repatriation Fund ng Overseas Workers Welfare Administration. On top of this, upon the recommendation of Vice Chair Hontiveros, a special provision was included tasking the DSWD, in consultation with the BFAR, or the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, to develop a social protection system which includes income support for fisherfolk whose livelihoods are negatively affected during periods of closed seasons for fishing and inclement weather, such that small crafts are prevented from going out to sea. Then, upon the advice of Vice Chair Risa, some funds will now be appropriated under the DSWD OSEC for a social protection program for adolescent mothers and their children. These funds shall be used to implement any of the strategies or interventions approved by the DSWD, the Commission on Population and Development, and other relevant agencies. Mr. President, economic recovery, employment jobs generation, and MSME support likewise remain very important features of our national budget. Hence, increases to budget items related to these have been sustained. Under the DOLE, increases remain for the tulong panghanap buhay sa ating disadvantaged or displaced workers worth 2.869 billion and government internship program worth 57 million. We took heed of the concerns of our Vice Chair, Senator Joel, who also chairs the Labor Committee, regarding employment and jobs generation, given that these budget items are key components of the government's contribution to the National Employment Recovery Strategy, NERS, aimed at generating 1 million jobs by the end of the Duterte administration. And to make sure that we reopen the economy safely, we included significant funding under DOLE for free COVID-19 testing for job seekers, aligned with the measure which we recently filed. This is in consideration of many employers who are hesitant to accept new job applicants who are unable to show proof that they are negative for COVID-19. Mr. President, under the DTI, initiatives related to MSME support and industry development have also been augmented, such as the establishment of negosyo centers, 664 million, and shared service facilities, or SSFs, 700 million. The Halal Industry Development Program, the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippine East Asian Growth Area, BIMP-IAGA program for Mindanao and Palawan, and the Empower PH project, focused on supporting local manufacturers of PPEs, face masks, and other critical supplies. Funding has also been provided for the continued operations of the One Town, One Product OTOP Next Gen program, 183 million, and for the new Creative Industry Development Program, 19 million, both of which are aligned with legislation pending in the Trade Committee chaired by Senator Coco Pimentel, also pushed by our Vice Chairs, Senators Marcos and Gatchalian. Then, Mr. President, in consultation with Senator Kiko Pangilinan, with help from the DTI, one of the general provisions was amended to state that in aid of economic recovery and pursuant to constitutional mandates, all government agencies and instrumentalities shall give preference to materials and supplies made and manufactured in the Philippines in the procurement of goods and infrastructure projects. We can call this a Tatak Pinoy provision because by having the government as a ready buyer, it widens the opportunity for local suppliers and enterprises, especially in light of the economic slowdown. Tuloy-tuloy din po, Mr. President, ang suporta para sa agrikultura. Under the DA-OSEC, there will be additional funding for the construction of facilities and procurement of agricultural machinery and equipment for use in various areas of the country. Augmentations have also been made to procure additional inbred seeds for distribution under the country's National Rice Program. This is in consultation and upon the initiative of our Vice Chair, Senator Cynthia Villar. To cushion the sustained blow from high fuel prices, significant funds up to 3 billion are appropriated for fuel vouchers and discounts to farmers and fisherfolk to be distributed by the DA and BFAR regional offices to qualified beneficiaries. Such financial support shall be provided to farmers and fisherfolk when the average Dubai crude oil price based on MOPS for 3 months reaches or exceeds $80 per barrel. We also reverted some loan proceeds, 5.32 billion, from the Philippine Rural Development Project as requested by Vice Chair Villar, Senators Recto and Lacson, which had been realigned by the House of Representatives to road development projects, as well as to support the parcelization of lands for individual titling, up to 2.6 billion. Then, upon the recommendation of our Vice Chair, Senator Amy Marcos, there will also be more funding, 250 million, for the Kadiwa ni Ani at Kita program to implement a distribution system of agricultural produce from farm gate to market, directly linking farmers and fisherfolk to consumers in high demand and depressed areas. We also adopted her recommendation to appropriate resources for the Young Farmers Challenge Fund to encourage and support the youth in staying or returning to agriculture, to engage them in food production, the processing of agricultural products and other farm-based enterprises, and to provide them the opportunity to own, lease, develop, and cultivate the land for agricultural purposes. Upon the request of Vice Chair Villar, funds were set aside to support the training component of the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, or RCEF, and the said amount shall be directly released to TESDA for its Farmers Field School program. There is also extra funding as training support to the Provincial Agricultural and Fisheries Extension System, or PAFES. The National Dairy Authority shall also receive an increased subsidy to 484.9 million for its Dairy Industry Development Program. Similar to the Tatak Pinoy provision we mentioned earlier for the DTI and local suppliers, we've also included a general provision as suggested by Senator Kiko Pangilinan, which enables the government to become a large procurer of agricultural and fisheries products from local farmers, fisherfolk, and their associations and cooperatives. This is pursuant to the Sagip-Saka law authored by Senator Kiko. Agencies like the DA, DSWD, DepEd, DOH, DILG, and the LGUs themselves can use these Tatak Pinoy agri-fisheries products for their respective feeding programs, relief operations, or food subsidies. By doing this, we not only increase the incomes of our farmers and fisherfolk, who are among those badly hit by the pandemic, but we also ensure, Mr. President, the availability of food for all sectors, thereby creating a virtuous cycle of productivity and jump-starting economic recovery. There are also funds, 2.536 billion for the Agro-Industry Modernization Credit and Financing Program Administration under the Agricultural Credit Policy Council, or ACPC, which shall be transferred to government banks, private banks, thrift banks, and universal banks, as well as non-bank financial institutions such as co-ops, farmers, or fisherfolk organizations, agri-fishery-based corporations, and other viable NGOs, all for the benefit of registered small farmers and fisherfolk and MSMEs. Funding has also been set aside for the BIFAR's Fisheries Management Areas Program, where the Bureau leads in the development and implementation of multi-agency and multi-sectoral ecosystem-based plans for the established 12 FMAs. This includes the operationalization of FMA Management Board scientific advisory groups, area-recommended harvest control measures, capacity building for stakeholders, and even economic safety nets for fisherfolk. Then there are some funds, upon the request of Vice Chair Ontiveros, to upgrade and capacitate municipal fisherfolk in the West Philippine Sea by providing them medium-scale handliner boats, lambaklad or rafts and fish corrals, and fish aggregating devices like payaws. As many know, infrastructure continues to be among the primary sectors being looked at to jumpstart and power the nation's economic recovery, as our Public Works Chair, Senator Pacquiao, would attest. And now that the opportunity remains to truly build better, we've taken steps to ensure that through Build, a better, more inclusive Philippines will emerge. In the area of active transportation and people mobility, and following the call by our Majority Floor Leader, Senator Mig Zubiri and Senator Pia, a special provision under the DPWH was included to ensure that in all projects related to the construction, maintenance, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and widening of roads, protected lanes for pedestrians and bicycles and other forms of active transportation are included in the design. Complementary provisions in support of people mobility and active transportation have also been included under the budget of the DOTR, chaired by our Vice Chair, Senator Poe. Then, upon the suggestion of Vice Chair Poe and Vice Chair Ontiveros, we've included a special provision under the DOTR for the implementation of a gender-responsive restroom program, which calls for the installation of all-gender restrooms in public transport terminals to provide a safe and inclusive space for people with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, Mr. President. Meanwhile, with Senate President Pro Tempore Recto's recommendation, significant funds have also been set aside as support for foreign-assisted projects, which shall include the Subic-Clark Railway, the North-South Railway System, train lines which we know would benefit the hometowns of many of our vice chairs in the committee, and the Metro Manila Subway Project Phase 1, which we believe would greatly complement the subway project that has already broken ground in the hometown of our colleague, Senator Binay. Considering that the transportation sector was among the hardest hit amidst the pandemic, your committee also ensured that adequate support is provided to them. For instance, a large amount of 10 billion, which includes program appropriations in the DA, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Transportation, for a widespread fuel subsidy program to provide financial assistance or fuel vouchers to qualified drivers of PUVs, taxis, tricycles, and full-time ride-hailing and delivery services nationwide, including affected fisherfolk and farmers, something which we worked with along with Vice Chair Senator Poe and Senator Pangilinan also pushed for. We've also ensured that the PUV service contracting program shall continue, setting aside significant resources of up to 4 billion for the coming year. A special provision was also included upon the suggestion of Vice Chair Senator Poe, stating that the use of private motor vehicle inspection centers for the registration of vehicles shall not be made compulsory. The same provision also states that vehicle owners will be allowed the option to have their vehicles tested at private emission testing centers for registration purposes. And in anticipation of the reopening of our skies to airline traffic globally, the subsidy for the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines has also been increased. As energy remains a key concern, Mr. President, as we seek to assure our future prosperity, several amendments have been made and maintained in support of the Department of Energy, as recommended by our Vice Chair in charge, Senator Win Gatchalian. Our Vice Chair. Specifically, some funds were included for the operations of the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, or EVOS, for energy transition studies, for assessments on the potential of waste-to-energy technology in the country. Then under the budget of the UP system, funding was appropriated under support for operations to be used exclusively for the organization of the Philippine Energy Research and Policy Institute, pursuant to Republic Act 11572, shepherded by Vice Chair Gatchalian. Long believed to be among the sectors that the country has yet to tap to fuel its economic recovery, housing remains among the focus areas of the government. Kaya po makakatanggap din ng karagdagang pondo ang ating housing sector sa ilalim ng ating panukalang budget. Halimbawa, may dagdag na pondo para sa rental subsidy program sa NCR at para sa pagkapacitate ng mga LGU or local government units hinggil sa resettlement na naniniwala kaming ikatutuwa ng ating Housing at Local Government Committee Chair, Senator Francis Tolentino. Meron ding pagtaas sa pondo ng National Housing Authority o NHA para sa iba't ibang proyekto tulad ng resettlement programs at community facilities para sa mga informal settler families at ng Social Housing Finance Corporation or SHFC para sa community mortgage program, thanks to Senators Tolentino and Vice Chair Ontiveros. We also included a special provision from Senator Pro Temp Recto designating that funds from the DNR will be set aside to implement its national land titling program. Then we followed through on Vice Chair Ontiveros' request for a special provision calling on the DSUD, the Department of Housing, the NEDA, the DOTR, and LGUs in Regions 3, 4A, and 5 to develop land use zoning guidelines to expand the scope for socialized and low-cost housing in the vicinity or in the approach to the train stations being built in the area in full support of the Balik Probinsya program in Luzon. We're also ensuring, Mr. President, that amidst the pandemic, we are still taking steps to boost our disaster preparedness, climate change resilience, and preserve our biodiversity and ecosystems. Hence, throughout this proposal, several provisions on these focus areas have been included. With advice from our former colleague and now House Deputy Speaker, Lauren Legarda, a general provision was included for multi-hazard impact-based forecasting and early warning systems for climate and disaster resilience, to adopt a whole-of-government approach to prevent and minimize loss and damage from impacts of extreme weather and slow-onset events in communities. A special provision was also included, also calling on the DNR to oversee the establishment and maintenance of a climate change information management system and network, including climate change risks, activities, and investments. The DNR shall also coordinate with the DICT to integrate climate change-related information, including climate and disaster risk assessments, in the Philippine Geoportal to enhance understanding on climate risks and apply in national and local development planning and program implementation. Upon the suggestion of Vice Chair Ontiveros, provisions were included calling on the DNR EMB or Environmental Management Bureau to review the existing tools or checklists used in the conduct of environmental impact assessment studies. A provision was also included mandating the Biodiversity Management Bureau to develop and adopt guidelines for the proper conduct of resource valuation, risk assessment, and biodiversity offsetting plans as part of the biodiversity assessment and monitoring system. The DNR is also mandated to implement its foreshore mapping and master planning activities in accordance with the Philippine Fisheries Code, such that fisherfolk settlements are established and that fisherfolk communities are given tenure to the lands they live in. Mr. President, our Department of Foreign Affairs will also receive more budgetary support with the initiatives from our Vice Chair, Senator Richard Gordon. Under the DFA OSEC, there will be an increase in its building fund, around 465.98 million more, which the agency can use to acquire new properties abroad in the Philippines for chanceries, residences, consular offices, to renovate existing DFA offices, and to purchase more equipment. Then appropriations have also been made under the General Management and Supervision to provide education allowances for dependents of officers and employees in foreign service posts who are not among the highest paid of our civil servants, Mr. President. also on the initiative of Vice Chair Gordon. We also continue with our transition into the digital world with increased funding for the DICT, or the Department of Information and Communications Technology, as recommended by our newest Vice Chairperson in the Committee on Finance, Senator Bato de la Rosa. For instance, budget items for Digital Jobs Philippines, Tech for Ed, and the National Broadband Plan will all receive augmentations with the aim of expanding ICT connectivity and access and deepening the digital skills of our people. Upon the urging of Vice Chair Ontiveros, provisions were included calling the DICT to develop policies and standards for incentivizing LGU community ICT service providers to develop and finance last-mile facilities for schools, public facilities, resettlement sites, transport hubs in localities that are not included in the department's free Wi-Fi program in 2022. Of course, Mr. President, dear colleagues, peace and order and national security remain paramount concerns, which is why we've also made augmentations to the budgets of the PNP and the DND, institutions and other related agencies which are close to the heart of our colleagues, Senators Lacson, Vice Chair De La Rosa. For instance, the Philippine National Police is set to receive significant increases for items like patrol cars, construction of new classrooms in Camp Crame, and for other programs and projects such as the PNP One Network, the operations of the PNP Anti-Kidnapping Group, among others. On the part of the Department of National Defense, or DND, the total increases that it will receive, totaling almost 3 billion, some will go to the acquisition of equipment to produce ammunitions, the implementation of its Information System Strategic Plan, or ISSP for ICT, as well as for the OCD, or the Office of Civil Defense. Meanwhile, the AFP as a whole will receive additional funds worth 1.63 billion, on the initiative again of Vice Chair De La Rosa and Senator Lacson, much of which will go to the procurement of mission-critical equipment and supplies. Significant funding will also be provided under the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, or OPAP, additional 535.98 million to be used exclusively for socio-economic development assistance to former MNLF combatants, subject to the execution of a MOA between OPAP and the DSWD. So, President, considering that the upcoming year will be an election year, we've also made changes to make sure that our voters will be safe once they go to the polls come May 2022. For instance, funds have been appropriated for additional support staff and medical personnel and to purchase anti-COVID-19 related supplies and materials under the COMELEC budget. Then, based on the submissions from Pro Temp Recto, some resources will also be set aside for the DepEd's Election Monitoring and Coordination Task Force Fund, or DepEd ETF, to be used for the following: operational expenses, upgrading of DepEd mobile app for May 2022 elections, and provisions of allowances and security to all DepEd personnel who will be participating. In many ways, 2022, Mr. President, will be a transition year, not only because of a new administration, but also because of the beginning of the implementation of the Mandanas-Garcia ruling. While we recognize any change will have its fair share of troubles and birthing pains, we have tried to take steps to make sure that the process is relatively smooth. For instance, under the DBM OSEC, a special provision was included mandating the DBM to review and update its national government and local government unit cost-sharing guidelines on continuing subsidies for the services that have already been devolved under the local government code. And to ensure that local government units will be able to meaningfully and effectively take on the devolved functions relating to infrastructure development, and LGU infrastructure capacity building program shall be conducted by the DPWH upon the recommendation of Senator Lacson. These are but some of the highlights of the amendments we have introduced to the proposed national budget with the help of our colleagues here in the Senate, particularly our vice chairs and the staff and the LBRMO, the Congressional Senate Budget Staff. A full listing and description of these amendments has been submitted for review by the plenary. And of course, none of this would be possible without the tireless efforts of our staff, Mr. President, the Senate Secretariat, the LBRMO under the leadership of Director Irene Pelanca, and Attorney Yoli Doblon. With their help, the help of the staff of other senators, we've endeavored that this budget remains true to its goal of charting a path out of this pandemic. Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues.
Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. There being no members who are listed to interpolate, the said measure or to interpolate the amendments and the proposed amendments, I move to close the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of amendments closed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Uh,
sorry, I'm sorry, I was on the phone. Are we closing the period of amendments? I just wanted to ask a few questions before we close, if I may.
Ano? Oo nga. Ako na. Yes, all right. May we encourage ask the majority leader to withdraw the
Yes,
motion?
Mr. President, I move to allow our colleague to ask a few clarificatory questions. I move to withdraw my motion. Mr. President.
Yes, and then we will,
The letter.
we will approve the amendments
Yes.
before the closing. All right, Senator Richard Gordon.
The letter.
recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to ask a manifest that I had submitted certain questions. I would just want to be sure if it was incorporated in the proposal of our distinguished chairman of the Committee on Finance. And this includes some things that we all share together on the matter of the teachers, where we wanted to make sure that the teachers get their SRA because as you know, they even came to the Blue Ribbon Committee last week and asked whether they were going to get the additional. And I had proposed that 40 billion unprogrammed fund for the program fund to ensure the funding so that we can implement and have sufficient funding for the welfare of health workers and full implementation of the Makala Carta for the public health workers and offer COVID-19 benefits, including special risk allowance. I wonder if that was included. I was told it was included. I just wanted to verify.
Yes, Mr. President, we've accepted most, if not all, of the amendments of the gentleman from Zambales, Mr. President. Unfortunately, his letter, we transmitted it to, I know he wanted Health Secretary Duque, Budget Secretary OIC Kanda, and the other officials to be present. And I forwarded his letter with the letter from this representation for them to attend. But we are in receipt of a letter from them saying that they cannot attend because, well, the president has not given them clearance. And secondly, they're on the third day of the Bayanihan Bakunahan National Vaccination Program, and they are in the Visayas today, Your Honor. Just to relay that information that this representation made effort to secure their presence here as he requested, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I have no doubt about that. I just wanted to make sure that the amendments, I even got a text from Senator Pangilinan that about they're not being able to attend. I was just concerned again that is the Senate now part and parcel of the prohibition for cabinet members and not just the Blue Ribbon from attending. I just wanted to make sure that their commitments to the nurses and to the health workers are covered. Healthcare workers are covered. They don't have to be if the gentleman from Aurora has assured us that there was a funding and you had approved the funding for the shortfall or the dramatic, the significant amounts that are needed to be able to cover them, because it would mean that they would be like voices crying out in the wilderness, not being able to get what is due them, Mr. President. So my question is, are they going to get it, Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor. We have, with the push from our colleagues and from yourself, we've really made space. That's why the health appropriations have increased. Thanks to your efforts, we are co-authors on that bill for the medical, for the allowances for our medical workers, our health workers, and we'll continue to push that. With 1 month left in the year, it's important that on the very first day of 2022 or the next year, that we have an appropriations in place for them so that they will be prioritized as you wish, Mr. President.
I'm not being insufferable. I just want to be sure that in the budget, what did we put in for them?
We have over 50 billion in for the specifically, which is a line item for the SRA, the health benefits, should any of our health workers suffer injuries or damages, or should any of them die or become severely sick while in the line of duty, which is the thrust of our proposed legislation with His Honor. Unlike for 2021, where there is no specific appropriation and the allowances are lumped in with other budgets of the DOH, there is a specific line item of over 50 billion there for our health worker benefits to ensure that they will receive this, and these funds will not be commingled or realigned to other purposes, Mr. President.
Well, I'm satisfied with the answer, and that is what I will report to the HRA, to the health workers, Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Angara. I can see
Yes, Your Honor.
Irina raising his hand. I'm willing to pause a while.
With the permission of the sponsor and Senator Gordon, Mr. President, may I just
Yes,
make
yes, certainly, Your Honor.
Senator Pangilinan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished sponsor.
And
We
the
requested during the Blue Ribbon Committee hearing for the invitation precisely of Secretary Duque and Secretary the OIC of DBM, but unfortunately they're not here today. We do not wish to delay the passage of this urgent piece of legislation, our budget, but may we request perhaps if Senator Angara is willing that after the completion of the BICAM meetings and that his work in the budget has been completed, that perhaps a separate, maybe just a one-day hearing of the Finance Committee can be conducted so that we can clarify a number of issues that were raised in another letter that was sent to us on the matter of the DOH disbursements of the support for our frontliners. Perhaps that can be a compromise so that we can proceed with the approval of the budget. We understanding that at least a separate hearing conducted by the Finance Committee for the purpose of oversight so that we can follow through on the issues raised by the nurses. We thank the DOH that they did respond in writing, but we'd like to probably have an opportunity to clarify a number of the points raised in the letter submitted to Senator Angara.
Yes, Mr. President, in response to Senator Pangilinan, I would be most willing to call that, and we thank them for their sentiment that they will not needlessly prolong the today's proceedings as long as we have that hearing. And then certainly I would be most willing, with the permission, of course, of our counterpart in the Committee on Health, if the Committee on Finance is the one assigned by our colleagues to lead this inquiry, I would be most willing, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no other manifestations on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let me just continue, Mr. President, and
Go
I,
ahead, Senator Gordon.
Senator Pangilinan and I moved during the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee. I am not too keen on getting them because of the emergency that is occurring in the world, and we need to vaccinate our people. And I don't want to delay the budget either. I just wanted to assure, as I said in my preliminary remarks, that our advocacy for the nurses as well as funding for the teachers is assured. So again, I say I will take the word of Senator Angara on the matter of the healthcare workers and still pursue the appropriation for them this coming year. I think we're clear on that, no, Senator Angara?
Absolutely, Mr. President, absolutely. And we thank him for his concern for our health workers, and we share that concern, and we will assist him as best as we can when the passage of the budget is attained, Your Honor.
And the other point is on teachers, Mr. President. Did we add anything for the teachers? Because I also addressed their problems insofar as needs in terms of additional salary benefits, if any, or additional budget for teachers, training and retraining, including the computerization program and the last mile schools. I had written a letter saying that 10 million each for the aforesaid could be included. Would that have been included, Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor. The gentleman made numerous or proposed numerous amendments, and we accepted most, if not all of them. For instance, the additional funds for the upgrading of the health sciences education laboratories, the teaching excellence training laboratory, the computerization program, the last mile schools program, the cash allowance to teachers, the appropriations for in-service training. Those are the education, but we also had the Department of Energy, Department of Health for health information technology, epidemiology and surveillance, provision of quarantine services and health surveillance. We mentioned already the COVID-19 benefits, requirements for staffing modifications, human resources for health, assistance to indigent patients, confined in government specialty hospitals, LG hospitals, Philippine General Hospital, West Visayas State University Hospital, the social protection and welfare for OFWs, under the DND, the AFP modernization sub-program, the Philippine Navy and Air Force camp development. These are but some. Under the CHED, I see some more amendments that we accepted. The provision of appropriate incentives to quality higher education institutions or HEIs and their programs, flexible learning and experiential learning for teacher education. There is also something for the Commission on Human Rights as a continuing program of research and education. So these are just but some of the many amendments that we accepted from the gentleman from Zambales, our vice chair, Mr. President.
I am very grateful to my chairman of the Committee on Finance. I was just going to be sure. I'm glad that you mentioned something, although you did not mention about Chairman Gascon, on the implementation of to honor him of the continuing program for research, education, and information. And I heard you say that they were included. And the other thing that of concern to me is the matter of the normal schools. There are 3 normal schools, and the item is for teaching excellence training laboratory. Would that have been covered as well, Mr. President?
Yes, we placed something for that. I think I read that out. The teaching excellence training laboratory.
I was talking about the Philippine normal schools. There are 3 of them, Mr. President. Philippine normal in Cebu, Leyte,
Yes,
and
Your Honor.
Mariano Marcos. In
It's
honor-
included, Your Honor. We've included some funds for that, Your Honor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess I thank you for your attention to my letter, and so that I can report this to the folks concerned. I just wanted to highlight that because all of us are in pursuit of better education, better health, and certainly the future of this country, and even in defense. I therefore just want to thank the Senate President for allowing me to ask these questions, and commend the chairman of the Committee on Finance for having listened to our pleas and his continuing support for the continuing appropriation for teachers, and later on with respect to Mr. Duque and the acting OIC to appear here so that we can hold him to everything that he has said under oath with respect to the SRA as well as the Magna Carta for teachers. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I appreciate it.
Thank you to our vice chair and who's been a very active member in defending the interest of our health workers and our teachers and advancing the cause of quality health and quality education in the country. We thank him for that, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Yes, may we recognize one of the co-sponsors of the measure, Senator Bato de la Rosa. Mr. President.
Senator Ronald De La Rosa is recognized.
I said you're a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a short manifestation, Mr. President. I would like to reiterate my strong opposition to the substantial reduction of the budget allocated for the support to barangay development programs of the NTF-LCAC in the committee report. However, with the permission of our hardworking sponsor, Senator Angara, and consistent with the points I raised during the period of interpellations, I would like to propose an amendment on the bill to retain the budget of the Barangay Development Program of the NTF-LCAC to 19 billion, the same amount that was given to them last year. I understand that the budgetary cut of 24 billion is due to the failure of the NTF-LCAC's failure to disclose how their budget was spent. However, I appeal to the hearts of my colleagues to give more consideration in order to end this decades-long insurgency. Without our budgetary support, the country's insurgency problem might resurrect again. Walang ibang makikinabang sa desisyon nating ito, kundi ang mga CTG, Communist Terrorist Group, to the detriment of our kababayans na higit na nangangailangan maramdaman ang ating gobyerno. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honor. Just to inform our Vice Chair and His Honor, who's made very powerful arguments in support of NTF cut. From the initial cut of around, which resulted in the budget for the Barangay Development Fund going down to 4 billion, we've raised it now to around 10 billion, Your Honor. So maybe in the BICAM we can even try to go higher. Ang mahirap po kasi dito, maghanap po ng pondo ng source. Kasi alam niyo naman ho, pag nagdadagdag ho tayo sa isang departamento, nagbabawas din po tayo sa... So kung matulungan niyo kami na mahanap siguro ng pondo na pwedeng itukoy, na pwedeng ilipat, willing naman ho tayo makipag-usap sa inyo. And of course, I've already been on record as saying that I believe the program should be given a chance. I believe the battle for the hearts and minds of our people living in formerly insurgent areas is very important, Mr. President. Kaya nagkakaisa na tayo dyan. Yun dun lang ho sa tactics na akin, kumbaga. Siguro magtulungan ho tayo going into the BICAM, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, I would like to express my gratitude to our very good chairman. Alam kong parang naiipit siya sa nag-uumpugang bato. Gustong-gusto niya itong problema ng NTF-LCAC dahil alam niya talagang problema ng komunismo ay kailangang matapos na, pero siya rin ay naipit kung saan siya hahanap ng pondo para isuporta dito. At ganun pa man, Mr. President, nagpapasalamat ako kahit na hindi na ma-restore sa yung 24 billion, malaki na masyado yun, kahit na yung 19, kahit hindi na ma-meet yung 19, tasasan lang konti, Mr. Chairman. Yun lang aking habol sana para kasi talagang I may be siguro kung I may be fighting a losing cause, kumbaga, kung if this plenary is concerned. Pero ito'y para na lang sa ating mga kababayan na matagal na talagang naghintay na mapansin ng ating gobyerno. I'm not blaming anybody, kahit na sino man nag-oppose itong Barangay Development Program dahil alam kong may mabigat sila na rason bakit sila nag-oppose. Dahil ito nga, as said by Senator Drilon, ito'y pangangalaga sa pundo ng bayan. Dahil nga, may rason naman na hindi lang na properly na-explain or na-explain kung paano lang nagamit yung budget. And I really agree with him. Ang akin na lang ngayon is, nakikiusap na lang ako kung pwedeng dagdagan pa dahil yun nga, kumbaga, i-dedicate ko na lang ito, Mr. President, sa aking mga kasamahan na namatay sa gira laban sa NPA, na kahit papaano, ngayong senador na ako, nakapag-contribute naman ako ng solusyon dito sa ilang dekada ng problema ng ating bayan, itong insurgency. Pakasabihin nila, kung kailan naging senador si Bato, saka pa lumakas uli ang NPA. Hindi po yan katanggap-tanggap, Mr. President. So alam ko naman na may mga rason tayo bakit tayo nag-oppose, and I perfectly understand. Sa akin lang is nakikiusap lang ako, Mr. President. May pakikiusap may be a voice in the wilderness, but still it's worth fighting for para sa ating mga kababayan doon sa kabundukan na talagang naghihintay, nag-expect na makatanggap ng kahit papaanong biyaya, kahit gaano kaliit na biyaya in the form of barangay development programs doon sa kanilang kanayunan. Yun po, Mr. President. Again, I would like to apologize to my colleagues kung may nasabi akong improper words in my previous interviews. Talagang I'm very sorry sa mga nasabi ko. Naintindihan ko rin naman yung posisyon nila. Ang akin lang, kiusap lang ako. Yun lang, Mr. President. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. At hindi ko na po tanongin sino yung sinasabi niyang tinutukoy niya dun sa salita niya. Pero no, I just want to say that Senator De La Rosa has made very powerful arguments, and the people in the LCAC are lucky to have him advocating. In fact, he's not a voice in the wilderness, Mr. President. Kasi sinundan siya ni Senator Tolentino at saka ni Senator Zubiri. Kahit papuntang COMELEC, papuntang NTF-LCAC, sumusunod po si Senator Tolentino. Dito kay Senator Bato de la Rosa, our Vice Chair, Mr. President.
He was our ex-future president, Mr. President, in the Senate. Ex-future president. But Mr. President, I'd like to join also the call of Senator Bato. But in fairness, it was from 3 billion, no? It was 3 billion in
Four.
4.
Yeah.
So tumaas tayo ng 10
Yeah.
times 2.5. So hindi naman, the cost is
Yeah.
not cost.
We are listening.
Sa
and then
BICAM, maybe
we're
we
trying
could,
to balance also the comments of our colleagues.
Of
They
course,
wanted,
of course.
Senator Lacson, Senator Drilon wanted to shift it from MOE to barangay development, more on infrastructure para may visible or tangible achievement po yung programa. And I agree with them that it's a good proposal. So we try to meld all of these proposals, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Yeah, sa barangay development kasi katulad namin po, Mr. President, sa Bukidnon, we're a big recipient of the funds. And so pati yung tatay ko sumunat sa akin at kinukulit ako linggo-linggo. Ang sabi ko naman, wag po siya mag-alala. I'm sure there will be budget that we can add to this to make sure that these programs are not left undone, no? And left on the wayside. And tama naman, it has to be an whole government approach, whole nation approach to it has to be development, education. If you want to improve the peace and order around the nation. We did that with the Bangsamoro Organic Law, Mr. President. This Congress, our colleagues here with the Bangsamoro Organic Law, now with the block grant that we were able to approve with the minority floor leader, yeah, they are now giving out projects left and right. They are now finally building daycare centers, health centers, municipal buildings na dati kawayan lang. Kaya ako'y sumusuporta din po dyan. But of course, accountability is key. As part of the budgeting system, the Senate also approves the national budget. We have to make sure that all the items are accounted for para hindi naman po masayang ang pondo ng bayan. And that it can be an account, it can be a fund that we can continue to give amounts for every budgeting season, because we know that the funds are actually spent well and for the development of the countryside. Mr. President, our minority floor leader would like to be recommended.
Senator Franklin, Minority Leader, second.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor yield to just one or two questions for clarification, Mr. President?
Yes, certainly. But before I yield, I would like to greet our idol a very happy birthday. I saw his merienda in the lounge, so I'm very excited to partake of that. That's why I'm going to answer his questions, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the good sponsor confirmed upon questioning of our colleague Senator De La Rosa that the total allocation for the NTF-LCAP is 10 billion. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct, Your Honor.
We do recall that the House bill, which embodied the General Appropriation Bill for 2022, indicated in your amendments a reduction of 4 billion from the 28 billion plus another 2 billion of NTF-LCAP spread to other agencies. When the good gentleman said 10 billion, is he referring only to that allocation under the assistance to local government units or barangay development fund, excluding those, the 2 billion spread out in other agencies?
The 2 billion was reduced, as you suggested, Mr. President, and our other colleagues, to 500 million, Mr. President. And the amounts, some amounts, that 1.5 billion was realigned to the Barangay Development Fund, Your Honor.
All right, so the barangay development fund, or however it is called, is 10 billion plus the 500 million spread out in the other agencies?
Yes, Your Honor, approximately,
Correct,
more or
right?
less correct.
So
Yes,
a
Your Honor.
total of 10 billion, 500 million.
It's actually 10.8 to be exact, Mr. President.
10 point?
8.
10 point, okay, just, thank you very much, Mr. President, for that clarification.
Most welcome, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, I move to approve the amendments presented to us by our chair, the Committee on Finance. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. The amendments are adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, I move that we approve on second reading House Bill number
We
101.
close the period of amendments.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got excited, Mr. President. Masarap kasi yung pagkain sa lunch. My apologies. Mr. President, I move to close the period of amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of amendments closed.